Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS Current Affair Analysis for 9th November 2020. In this video, we'll be discussing a couple of issues. The first one is with respect to the aspect of green growth, that is, incorporating the environmental principles in the economic developmental models. This is taken from the Hindu. And the second one is titled The Good Fix, which is about the importance of nutrition while framing our agricultural policies and how to address the issue of hunger in our country. The first article is taken from the Hindu and it is written by our ex Environment Minister, Mr. Jairam Ramesh, and it is titled COVID 19 Climate and Carbon Neutrality. So, the present context of this article is how COVID has actually shown us the importance of maintaining an ecological balance, because all the ill effects which are often propagated with respect to the impact that ecological imbalance will have on our environment. To put it in short, what happens when we go against the laws of nature has been exhibited by COVID 19, and COVID 19 is no match when we compare with the danger that climate change poses at us. So, the central argument of this article is we have to move towards green growth. Now, what do you mean by green growth? Often, when we talk about the context of industrial nations or industrial revolution, that is after 1750, the model of development is always focused on using energy resources in such a way that they are leading to economic growth. Say, for example, whether it is coal, oil, etc. Germany, US, and many other countries have prospered at the cost of exploiting our environment, and they've burnt huge amounts of coal to generate the present wealth that they have, and that is the reason they are able to afford to move towards a cleaner technology. At the same time, when we're talking about the Middle East, it has grown in size in the terms of economy just because of the oil resources that were found there. It is in this context we have to understand that it is time for us to move towards green growth or sustainable development. Now, what is at the heart of this sustainable development is efficiency of resources, and often we ignore one fact. We are often advocating the use of renewable energy, but you have to understand that all the natural resources, say for example water, is also a renewable energy. But the problem is at the pace which we are using these natural resources, we are not giving them enough time to replenish. So the pace of development is also a matter of concern. We are withdrawing water from aquifers more than what they take to recharge, the time taken for them to recharge. Similarly, recently there was a meeting with respect to the utilization of timber. I'm just quoting an example from a national level policy making. So, in this body, they have decided that they have to reorient our national forest policy, which is mainly responsible for the sustainable timber use. There was a draft policy which was released last year. So it talked about how we have to utilize our timber resources because we are importing timber from elsewhere. So this shows the importance of our ecosystem services and its role in our economic growth. So it is definitely possible for us to move towards a green growth or a model that utilizes natural resources efficiently in such a way that we give enough space through our policy measures to ensure that they are getting replenished from time to time. So that is the focus of this article. In this article, the author quotes a very important ministry report that came out, which is called The Assessment of Climate Change over Indian Region. So he points out that this is an excellent analysis of the present state of things and how our R&D activities with respect to science and technology must focus on those areas which talk about how we can mitigate this impacts of climate change on various walks of life, and at the same time also look upon those technologies which can prove to be effective in containing this greenhouse gas emissions. So this has been the agenda of government for a very long time, and in this context he quotes the example of how policy measures like phasing out HFCs or hydrofluorocarbons, which were once upon a time responsible for the depletion of ozone, were eventually phased out, and then because of the focus of the companies across the world to develop alternative technologies, these were phased out, and today we can witness how successful that Montreal Protocol was because of the political will. So this is all about political will. So what is the way forward? The way forward is shown by various countries and political organizations like EU, which focused upon carbon neutrality. Now, what do you mean by carbon neutrality? The fundamental idea here is whatever might be the technology that we are adapting, it will be in such a way that the greenhouse gas emissions or the carbon emissions that come out of our economic activities will eventually be taken up by the technologies that are a part of the ecosystem as well. So in that way, the amount of gases or the greenhouse gases or carbon emissions that are released will be equal to whatever might be the amount that is absorbed also. So in this way, we have China, we have South Korea, we have EU, and various other Scandinavian countries as well, which have moved towards this objective of carbon neutrality, and it is a worthwhile goal that we have to follow. So what this essentially demands is one, like we have already spoken about, a shift in our R&D priorities. We have to focus on those areas which moves us towards this carbon neutral economy so that the impact of climate change is mitigated. The reason why the author suggests that we have to move our entire focus upon these areas, and the entire globe must work together to move towards a sustainable developmental idea, is because it requires a lot of effort and re-engineering, because we cannot expect the complete dismantling of existing ecosystem. Say for example, you have a city like Delhi. Is it practically feasible to expect the government to demolish all the existing buildings to rebuild a new one? That is not possible. So re-engineering is the only way forward, and it's a very complicated idea, because you will have to understand the structure of each and every building, each and every geographical terrain, and make it conducive to the environment in that context. That requires a huge amount of effort and scientific understanding of the entire ecosystem as such. So this will be applied in particular areas. In this context, Germany has actually done that by moving towards electricity sector, which is moving towards the renewable energy, and it took quite a amount of effort as well as time, because it took almost 15 years in a country that is as developed as Germany to completely make a transition towards that. Imagine the case in a densely populated country like ours. So, post COVID 19 world should always focus upon this central idea of green growth, whether it is in the aspect of urban planning or whether it is in the aspect of development of smart cities, villages. This entire idea of green growth rests upon the adaptability of our ecosystem to bring up infrastructure that is conducive with the environmental requirements. So COVID can be looked at as an opportunity to realize this. We have been talking about the national infrastructure pipeline, which requires nearly 102 lakh crores to create the necessary infrastructure so that India can grow again at the pace of 7 to 8%. This 102 lakh crores should be invested in existing technologies that are already tested and proven elsewhere with the aspect of green growth. For example, in urban areas, we have to create waste to energy plants. We have to mainstream this through governmental policies. So that is what the author is trying to say, that we have to induce policies in such a way that both behavioral change as well as structural change happens simultaneously. The second article for the day is taken from the Indian Express and it is titled The Good Food Fix. So recently, our Prime Minister has announced that nearly 8 crops and 17 of its varieties were actually biofortified. Now, what do you mean by biofortification? What is the significance of this step? Let us try to understand. But before that, we have to understand the state of hunger in our country. If we take a look at various reports, especially with respect to childhood, which happens to be the formative years of our life, there is a statistic which says that 38% of the children in our country are either stunted or they are wasted. Basically, it means that they are malnourished. So, the problem here is the structure of our agricultural systems. When we are talking about agriculture, the emphasis upon agricultural policy has always been inclined towards productivity. Say a particular geography is inclined towards wheat production, the entire emphasis upon that agroecological region has been to improve the productivity but not the quality. Quite understandably, this should have been the focus in the 1960s, where India was facing severe shortage of food grains. And therefore, the concept of green revolution came into the picture. And at the same time, even our population has exploded multifold. So the focus is no longer upon productivity because as a major agricultural economy, thanks to the various technologies that we have adopted, we are now able to meet the productivity requirements. But the problem is, again, with respect to management of these food grains, and then the second one is about quality. Whenever we are talking about hunger, we are only looking at the number of calories when we are deciding our policy matters with respect to the poor people. Even the National Food Security Act, the allotment ratios for various states are still based upon the census of 2011, after which significant amount of changes are happening. So there is no proper data which is dynamic enough to meet the requirements of this migrating population, that is a moving population. So it is also important in the context of one nation one ration card as well. So this is a secondary issue, but the major issue is that of quality. In today's world, we do not have in our country a complete meal. What do you mean by this? Let me explain. The normal accepted strategy with respect to nutrition by the World Health Organization is that a normal human being, and it varies according to the geography of the region and the kind of work that people do, but 40% should be uh, calories from carbohydrates, the 30% should be coming from proteins, and then another 30% should be coming from fats. Now, when we're talking about national food security, we are only giving subsidized food grains in the form of rice and wheat. How about the proteins and fats that are required as a part of this? A certain states give adequate amount of protein in the form of subsidized dals, and a few states do give subsidized food cooking oil or edible oil, which is the fat that is required for our body. But most of the states are not adequately or completely providing this nutritional security, that is of proteins as well as fats. In this context, if you have to consume enough protein, the usual sources are dals or eggs, milk, etc., or even sometimes meat. This sources are generally not ensured in our food security. So in order to compensate, the poor population consume excess of this carbohydrates, and since they were working on fields, the food would have been absorbed by the body, and therefore there were no lifestyle diseases back then. But with the advent of technology and the change in the structure of our work, this increased carbohydrate consumption has actually translated into a imbalanced diet and is causing a lot of on one side it is causing a lot of lifestyle diseases like diabetes, and on the other end of the spectrum, when we are talking about the poorer population, they don't even have access to these. So they are finding children where they are malnourished, because excess of carbohydrates is not what children require. They also require, apart from this macronutrients, there is something called micronutrients. Say for example, they need calcium, they need magnesium, selenium, zinc, iron, etc., and a plethora of various other vitamins in the form of B complex and C and all the vitamins which will enhance the growth of a child. But these micronutrients are simply not available in the meals. Of course, we do have the midday meal scheme, which ensures that a balanced, complete, nutritious meal is available to the kids. But what is the extent of the coverage? How much is this actually translating into results for the entire population is yet to be seen. At least in the times of the COVID pandemic, it is safe to assume that the midday meal scheme has taken a hit because of the lockdown and various other issues. So, access to this quality food has been a problem, and this has been projected as one of the argument in support of opening up of schools in various states. But we will have to understand that all these are temporary measures. It requires a broader strategy to come up with the answer for this food security problem. So, what needs to be done? That is the question that is being asked here. There are twofold strategies. First one is upon improving the quality of food, and the second one is about improving the access of the food. Now, when we are talking about access, it is basically a means of improving the incomes of the people in such a way that they can afford a wider basket of goods. It is not simply possible for a common man to afford all kinds of fruits and vegetables because of the meager incomes that they have. So this is the structural aspect of our economy that we have to look at. And the first one, with respect to quality, we are actually on that path because of the efforts by our R&D wings of our agricultural ministry or IARI, etc. So the recent announcement that 17 biofortified crops is a step in this direction, because when we're talking about biofortification, we are talking about a technology wherein the desired quantity of a particular mineral or a nutrient will be enhanced using technology, biotechnology to be precise, in such a way that it meets the daily requirement standard of the individual. Say for example, recently we have seen a case where a farmer from Haryana has received Padma Shri because of his invention of Madhuban carrot. Madhuban carrot is a type of a carrot which has beta carotene or retinol, which improves eyesight, which solves the issue of vitamin A deficiency. Similarly, this biofortified crops which were announced, 17 crops were announced. These are important from prelims perspective. Please go through them after this article. These 17 biofortified crops are also a step towards improving the quality of this. Now, when we're talking about access, we have to focus upon the rural sector. Why am I talking about the rural sector? Because even till date, 50% of our population depends on agriculture, and a significant amount of them are in rural economy. It is not to say that there are no non-farming jobs in the rural sector, but the majority are in agricultural sector alone. So what we have to do is focus on enhancing the price discovery of farmers. So we will be able to produce more amount of incomes in our rural economy if we change our strategies with respect to agriculture. The most important ones are focusing on fruits and vegetables, or basically the horticultural crops. Despite being such a agroecologically diverse nation, we are not in a position to leverage the capacities because of lack of infrastructure and storage facilities. Like say for example, take the case of tomato. When we have a bumper harvest, there is a price crash. There is no guarding mechanism, there is no storage infrastructure. And what happens as a result is either they get dumped in the markets or the price crashes, which both of the situations will eventually lead to a price discovery problem for the farmers. So this should be solved, and for that we have to bring in infrastructure with respect to our TOP, that is tomatoes, onions, and potatoes, which are the most commonly used horticultural crops across the country. We have to start with that. There has been a promise a few years ago with respect to these three crops, and a fund of 500 crores was allotted to infrastructural development in this sector, but nothing has materialized actually. If we are actually looking for investments and also inspiration, we have to take a look at our own Operation Flood, which is about farmers of milk. So what happened here is we have relied upon the uh, principle of cooperative. Say for example, Amul is a very successful cooperative because of economies of scale attained by bringing farmers under FPOs or a single organization like Amul, which has led to the scaling up of activities across the country. Amul has acquired various dairies and it has been running efficiently various dairies across the country, and we can utilize such best practices and replicate them elsewhere as well. Secondly, for price discovery, we also have to improve two other aspects. The first one is the financial market awareness. A lot of farmers in our country do not have the ability to make a transaction on a financial market, say for example forward market or commodity market. So because of the lack of this awareness, they are not in a position to leverage technologies or platforms like enam. Even though enam is a much less complicated platform, even awareness of such a platform is not available. If you take the example quoted in the Shanta Kumar committee, this committee has said that only 6% of the farmers knew about MSP. So, which is a shocker considering the entire controversy that is going on around this MSP in the recent farm bills. So, this aspect of financial market awareness is to be taken care of. Second thing is achieving economies of scale through cooperative farming and corporate sharing model. So this is required in a particular sense because we have to move towards nutrition smart agriculture that is in tune with the requirements of our growing population and also the needs of our economy. If we can actually do this and develop the agro processing zones which are focused on exports, not only are we going to address the problem of poverty in our nation, we are also going to be a very rich country with respect to agriculture because there is a huge potential with agricultural exports. Both these aspects, whether it is about the quality or whether it is about the access, have been completely ignored by various agricultural policies. This step taken by the Prime Minister is definitely a commendable one and a welcome step. That is the gist of this article.